This morning, you probably got into a car, a bus, or a train and covered miles without breaking a sweat. Rewind 100,000 years, and that same distance could have taken you 2 days of walking through open land, with no map, no road, and no guarantee you'd survive the trip. For almost all of human existence, movement was slow, dangerous, and entirely powered by your own body. Today, it's so effortless we barely notice it happening. But that wasn't always true. And the story of how we got here says a lot about who we are. Humans were never built for speed. A cheetah can outrun a car. A horse can gallop for miles without tiring. We max out around 15 miles an hour, and only for a few seconds. But nature gave us something else instead: endurance. A person can walk 15 to 20 miles a day, rest, and do it again the next morning. And the morning after that. For weeks on end. Most no other land animal can sustain that. Our bodies are quietly engineered for it. The arch in your foot works like a spring, storing and releasing energy with every stride. The Achilles tendon does the same job, taking pressure off your muscles. A special ligament along the back of the neck keeps your head steady while your legs do the work below. And we sweat. Millions of glands releasing heat, while most large animals have to stop and pant to cool down. We weren't designed to win a sprint. We were designed to outlast everything else. In Tanzania, at a place called Laetoli, scientists found footprints preserved in hardened volcanic ash, left by 2 people walking side by side more than 3.5 million years ago. Those prints look almost identical to the ones your own feet would leave. For millions of years, walking was the only transportation humans ever had. And somehow, it carried our species to every corner of the planet. Around 70,000 years ago, groups of humans began drifting out of Africa. Not in one grand journey, in small steps, generation after generation, each group pushing a little further into land no human eye had ever seen. Over thousands of years, people crossed into the Middle East, spread through Asia, reached Europe, pushed into Siberia, crossed into what is now Alaska, and eventually made their way down through the Americas. All told, that's tens of thousands of miles covered on foot, into a world nobody had a name for yet. And it wasn't aimless wandering. Archaeologists have dug up volcanic glass tools far from any volcano, ocean shells found deep inland, and traded goods that moved across entire mountain ranges. People were traveling on purpose, to trade, to meet other groups, to reach resources they already knew were out there. This was an early version of a trade network, run entirely on foot. Walking has one obvious weakness. It stops at the water's edge. A river, a strait, an ocean. For most of human history, these weren't obstacles you crossed. They were dead ends. You either found a shallow spot or you turned back. Then something changed. On the Indonesian island of Flores, researchers found stone tools going back roughly 800,000 years, on an island that was never connected to the mainland, even when sea levels dropped during the ice ages. There was always open water in between, which means someone, a very long time ago, figured out how to cross it. We don't know what they used. Wood and reeds don't survive that long. But the tools left behind prove the crossing happened. The first boats were almost certainly accidents. A floating log grabbed midstream. A bundle of reeds that happened not to sink. But what came next wasn't an accident at all. Around 65,000 years ago, people crossed from Southeast Asia into Australia, a journey requiring at least 60 miles of open ocean, far enough that you can't see the other side. Someone built a vessel, pushed off from land they knew, and paddled toward land they'd only heard described. Centuries later, the Polynesians took this even further. Starting around 3,000 years ago, they sailed across the vast, empty Pacific in double-hulled canoes loaded with food, livestock, and entire families, navigating using nothing but stars, ocean swells, cloud patterns, and the flight paths of birds. No instruments. Some of these voyages covered well over 2,000 miles of open water. They reached and settled nearly every habitable island in the Pacific, from Hawaii to Easter Island to New Zealand. Land was conquered. Water was conquered. But there was still one stubborn limit: how much a person could carry. A human body can manage maybe 40 to 50 pounds before it becomes exhausting. You could walk for days, but you couldn't drag a large kill or a family's belongings very far on your back alone. So people got creative. First came simple dragging, hides used as makeshift sleds. Then came the travois. Two poles lashed into a V shape with a platform stretched between them, dragged by one person, but capable of hauling far more weight than a human back ever could. Almost none of these survived archaeologically. They were wood and hide. But we know they existed because people were still using them when Europeans first arrived in the Americas. The real turning point wasn't a tool, though. It was a partnership. Around 15,000 years ago, humans domesticated dogs, and one of their first jobs was hauling. In Arctic regions, sled dogs could pull loads across ice that no person could manage alone. Then, roughly 5,500 years ago, on the grasslands of modern-day Kazakhstan, a group called the Botai went further and tamed horses. Evidence shows up as wear patterns on horse teeth from early bits, and traces of mare's milk baked into ancient pottery. These weren't people who simply hunted horses. They rode them. That single shift rewrote the map. For nearly 300,000 years, human travel topped out at walking pace, roughly 4 miles an hour. On horseback, that jumped to 30. In one generation, the world effectively shrank by a factor of 8. Trade routes stretched further, messages traveled faster, and warfare changed permanently, since an army on horseback could arrive before anyone knew it was coming. Different regions adapted the idea with whatever animal fit the land. Donkeys through deserts, camels across the Sahara, reindeer over Arctic snow, llamas through the Andes. Wherever humans settled, they found a way to put an animal's strength to work. Here's a detail that surprises most people. Humans crossed every ocean on Earth before anyone invented the wheel. The oldest wheel we've found, unearthed in Slovenia, dates back roughly 5,200 years. Compare that to boats, which go back at least 10,000 years, or horseback riding at 5,500 years, or the crossing to Australia 65,000 years before that. The wheel wasn't humanity's first big idea about movement. It was one of the last. It didn't even start as a transportation tool. The earliest wheels were used for shaping pottery, a spinning disc for molding clay. At some point, someone tipped that disc onto its side and asked what would happen if you put weight on top of it. Early wheeled carts were heavy, solid, and clumsy. They got stuck in mud and cracked on rough terrain. For a while, a horse pulling nothing was still faster than a horse pulling a cart. Then, around 2000 BC, someone designed the spoked wheel. Lighter, stronger, faster, and chariots became possible. Around the same period, the city of Ur laid down what's considered one of the first paved roads. Put a horse, a wheel, and a road together, and for the first time in human history, you had something resembling an actual transportation system. Trade expanded. Empires became logistically possible. Armies and supplies could move hundreds of miles without collapsing along the way. Walk, float, drag, tame, roll. Every single one of those breakthroughs took thousands of years to arrive, and every one was built directly on top of the last. Now you sit in a metal box moving at 70 miles an hour and call it a commute. You cross an ocean in 6 hours and complain about the Wi-Fi. You summon a car to your exact location with your thumb and get annoyed it takes 5 minutes. Your ancestors walked barefoot across entire continents they had no names for, toward places they'd never seen, because stopping meant dying. We solved the problem of distance so thoroughly that most of us forgot it was ever a problem at all. Every road, every runway, every railway line on Earth traces back to the same starting point. Someone looking at the horizon with no idea what was out there and deciding to walk toward it anyway.